Hi, everybody. This is Guided Practice 13. We're on section 3.4, definition of a function. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to evaluate our function and understand function notation. This is not f times x, this is f of x. And that tells you what the variable is that you're using, and it holds the place for your x. So when they're giving me a function here, and they're asking, what's f of 2? Well, f of 2 is a set of instructions that says replace the x with a 2. So I'm going to take negative 2 squared plus 3. That's negative 4 plus 3, which is negative 1. There we go. Then they want f of negative 1. So that means I'm replacing my x with negative 1. Make sure that when you do that, you put your negative 1 in parentheses. This becomes the opposite of negative 1 squared, which is 1 plus 3, or positive 2. Then they want f of a plus b. That means that I take the x out and I replace it with an a plus b. So minus a plus b in place of the x, square it, plus 3. If we want to simplify it, then we square that. So negative and a plus b squared is your a squared, plus 2ab plus b squared. If you need to FOIL it, please do. And then distribute your negative. So this is negative a squared minus 2ab minus b squared plus 3. Okay. And then f of a minus f of b is going to look like this. So f of a minus f of b. So f of a means we replace the x with an a. So negative a squared plus 3. And then we're going to subtract, use parentheses because more than one thing is coming next, f of b. So taking your x and replacing it with a b this time. And simplify that. That's a squared plus 3 plus b squared minus 3. And that's going to give us just negative a squared plus b squared. Okay. Next, in number 2, we want to find the domain of this radical. And we've talked about how underneath a radical, we need that to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to take what's there, the 16 minus x squared, and I'm going to set it greater than or equal to 0. Okay. This is now a quadratic inequality that you know how to solve. I'm going to add my x squared to the other side. Or actually, what I'm going to do is remember step 1 was to set this equal to 0. If you don't like it this way, you can kind of move them to the other side. But this is factorable as 4 minus x and 4 plus x because it's a difference of 2 squares. That's going to give me x equals 4 and x equals negative 4 as my 2 values. Right? With an inequality, what do I do with those? I set up my number line. So negative 4 and 4. We set up our intervals. And we choose test points. So negative 5, 0, and 5. And we test them in the inequality. So we're testing them right here in this highlighted green one. So when you plug in negative 5, we get 16 minus 25 is greater than or equal to 0. That's going to give me negative 11. No, 9. Is it greater than or equal to 0? And that's a no, so we're going to lose this one right here. When we plug in 0, we get 16 is greater than or equal to 0, and that's a yes. And then when you choose 5, you get 16 minus 25 again, and that's negative 9. Is that greater than or equal to 0? No. So we cross that one out. And so that means the only thing that works here, my domain, is going to go from negative 4 to 4. Now, do we include or not include? Well, right here, when we look at our inequality symbol, we do include. So we're including the endpoints in that case. So this is our final answer. For number 3, we've got a function x squared minus 1. We want to sketch the graph, define the domain and range, and find the intervals where it's increasing and decreasing. Okay, so right away I can tell you what the domain is because this is a polynomial. This is a quadratic, so it's negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay. This is a parabola that has a positive sign in front of the x squared, so it's going to open up. So when I graph this, let's jot down a couple of points. When I plug in 0, I get -1. When I plug in -1, I get 0. When I plug in -2, 4 minus 1 is 3. When I plug in 1, I get 0. When I plug in 2, I get 3. If I graph those, 0, -1 is right here. -1, 0 is right here. 1, 0 is here. -2, 3 is up here. And here we go, right? Something that looks like this. So now I can go ahead and state the range. Notice that my y values start here at -1 and go up. I don't have anything below -1. So it's going to start at -1 and equal -1 and go on to infinity from there. Okay. Then we think about when the roller coaster is going up and down. Remember, we're riding from left to right. So it's increasing when the roller coaster is going up. So that's from my vertex at the bottom on to the right. So this is from when x is 0 to infinity, but we're not including the x because we're not including the 0 because that's the point where the vertex is. And it's decreasing from -infinity all the way to 0. Oh wait, I said we're not including the 0 and I put a bracket on it. So let's put a parentheses on it. Okay. At 0, you're not going up or down, you're turning directions. Okay. And lastly, here we go. For f of x equals square root of x plus 1, find the domain and range. So we start with the domain. And we have the square root. So we're going to look at what's underneath there. That has to be positive. So x plus 1 has to be greater than or equal to 0. If we subtract the 1 to the other side, that's when x is greater than or equal to -1. So the corresponding interval will go from -1 on to infinity. So that's my domain. That means when I go to graph this and pick points, I have to pick points that are in that interval. Otherwise, they're not going to work. So I'm going to start with -1 and go for a couple from there. So -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's see. -1, when I plug it into the function up here, is going to give me 0. So at -1, I'm at 0. At 0, a square root of 1 is 1, so we're right up here. At 1, we're looking at the square root of 2. At 2, we're looking at the square root of 3. And at 3, we're looking at the square root of 4, which is 2. And so what happens is you get a graph that looks like this. Okay. So then what's its range? Well, I don't have any values below 0, but I do have a value at 0, right? So we're starting from here and going, all our values are up that way. So we start at 0, include 0, and go on to infinity. Where is it increasing? Well, the roller coaster is going up all the time. So this is increasing from 0 to infinity, and it is decreasing never. Okay.